Tonight, an increase in minimum wage takes the spotlight in the Prime Minister's first national address as he defends his government's decision to increase the cost of electricity. We've got reaction tonight. Plus, a worsening shantytown issue on Abaco has immigration officials on high alert. Find out the growing illegal community that's led to a major crackdown on that island. Also, Bahamian excellence on display. Artist Tavares Strawn becomes the first Bahamian named a MacArthur Fellow. Meet the creative genius behind the extraordinary work that landed him the title. And in our news at 7:30, the Royal Bahamas Police Force praised for its efforts in the crime fight on Turks and Caicos Islands. Our news at 7 starts now. Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Kindino Knowles. The Prime Minister addressing the nation last evening in his first national address since coming to office. Among the announcements was the much anticipated increase in minimum wage. The nation's leader also defending his government's decision to increase the cost of electricity while announcing relief efforts he says will propel the country forward. Atalia Hall is on the story.
The country's new minimum wage will be $260 a week.
It's been a long-awaited promise by the Progressive Liberal Party. Minimum wage now moving to $260 a week, both in the public and private sectors. The last time minimum wage was raised in the country was back in 2015.
Will the increase help? Yes, it will. It was long awaited, long overdue, and the extra money every week will make a difference.
The PM admits the minimum wage increase will not eliminate the hardship of trying to make ends meet for many, but insists it's a step closer to a livable wage. As for the hike in fuel costs at BPL, well, the PM says BPL is working to minimize the impact and says the increases are short-term.
With solar microgrids in the Family Islands already operating in several locations and expanding to benefit 17,000 Family Islanders. And the launch of a 60 megawatt solar farm in New Providence in the next year means that approximately 25 to 30% of the island's electricity needs will come from solar.
The nation's leader also announcing that 38 items have been added to price control, including diapers, chicken, and eggs. And then there were his comments on crime.
Our police now have new leadership, new resources, and new initiatives targeting gangs and guns. We have created a collaborative, multi-agency approach to interrupting the cycles of violence that are tearing up our streets and communities.
And as for the healthcare sector, the PM says the government will break ground by the end of this year for a new $200 million hospital in Grand Bahama.
Reporting for us tonight, well, Free National Movement leader Michael Pintard, mincing no words, responding to the Prime Minister's national address last night, saying the Prime Minister was not clear on a number of serious issues.
Did the Minister of Works, who denied knowing, was he in copy of any memo or email? Was he made aware of it by his board that the trades ought to have been executed? Was he briefed by any of the outgoing board members or staff members at BPL? Is he prepared, he and the Prime Minister, to say on their feet in Parliament that they have not seen the documents and the memos from multiple members of the government, including the hedging committee?
The F&M leader also weighing in on the crime situation.
We, like members of the public, believe that we are in crisis. It is unacceptable that we could, for such a small country, have 107, the last count, murders, and there is an outrage by this government. We do not see a sense of urgency, and we accept that they have not, and we have not created this situation. But the role of leadership is to coordinate all stakeholders to address a crisis.
Sasha Lightbourne will have more reaction to the Prime Minister's national address coming up in our news at 7:30. The shantytown issue on Abaco worsening since Hurricane Dorian. Immigration officials revealing today that one shantytown tripling in size since then, the issue resulting in a crackdown on that island. Berthany McDermott has the details.
The immigration minister promising a crackdown on Abaco after a recent operation revealed the farm shantytown grew by an estimated 200 acres since Hurricane Dorian. Immigration Minister Keith Wells says they plan on doing something about it.
We want to assure the Abaconians and the Bahamian people that there will be an increased presence from this point going forward in the Abacos and certainly in other areas non-stop.
This means Abaconians can expect an increase in immigration officers present on the island. Operation Expedition comes after South and Central Abaco Member of Parliament John Pinder expressed concern over the shantytown issue on that island. Since Hurricane Dorian destroyed the Mud and Pigeon Pea shantytown, officials say they're seeing the emergence of shantytowns in other areas of Marsh Harbor, like off SC Boodle Highway. Then there's the issue with the farm.
From afar, it was going to look like if it was planned, subdivision. It spread so far now.
The operation moved into Abaco on Friday and 52 people were detained and airlifted to New Providence. Of that figure, 24 were sent to the detention center, 13 were undocumented, and 9 held valid work permits, but for employers in New Providence.
Some vessels we have found some trap doors beneath where persons were pulled from. We had houses where they had trap doors beneath where we pulled persons from. We also had individuals who are Bahamian citizens. We entered their home and we want to stress that you can be charged for harboring illegal persons. They would hide them in the closets. They would hide them in the cupboards, the cabinets. And so we saw this as a challenge.
Immigration Director Katura Ferguson explains operations like these are a costly venture.
Airfare to and from Abaco, specific to this operation, was some $25,000. Accommodations was $25,480.80. This does not take into account food, ground transportation, and equipment.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
To get another look at that story, visit ournews.bs. It's time now for your first look at temperatures across the country. Meteorologist Greg Thompson, he is standing by in the Weather Center. Greg?
Thanks, Kendin, and a happy Wednesday evening, everybody. A nice evening outside. We do have a few isolated showers out there. We had a couple of those earlier, but we are partly cloudy. Temperatures in the upper 80s, 87. Your winds are out of the southeast at 10 miles per hour, and your feels-like temperature at around 89 degrees. Family Island temperatures right now, we have 85 in Freeport, Grand Bahama, Marsh, Abaco, 82. We pick up 84 in Alistown, Bimini. Over in Great Harbor Key, that's in the Berry Islands, 82 there. 82 in Nicholstown, Andros. Here in the capital, as I mentioned, we are at 87. 79, a little cooler in Governor Sabi Luthra. Central Bahamas, 84 in Kemps Bay. Then we pick up 86s in Arthurstown, Cat Island, as well as in Georgetown, the Exumas. Coburn Town, San Salvador, 85. And in Deadman's Key, Long Island, you guys are currently at 85 as well. And deep south into the southeast Bahamas, 87 in Duncantown, Ragged Island. Colonel Hill, Crooked Island, you are at 84. 85 in Delectable Bay, that's in Crooked Island, Acklands actually. 84 in Abrams Bay, Matthewtown, Inagua, 85, and our neighbors to the southeast, Tricks and Caicos Islands, you are warming out our temperature profile at 87. Satellite view, we have a lot of moisture moving in out of the Gulf of Mexico, courtesy of Carl, which formed last evening over in the southwest Gulf. Some showers and isolated thunderstorm moving across the Florida coast, but of course we had a couple of isolated thunderstorms across Andros, being the big yard and the biggest island in the chain of islands here. Warming temperatures during the day and some moisture in place, lending some showers and thunderstorms. We will continue to see this trend tonight as a lot of that moisture moves across South Florida. Some more showers in the forecast tomorrow. That's a look at our weather. Stay with us, a look at the tropics, and your extended forecast is still to come.
Still to come on Our News, the latest on an inmate found beaten in his cell at the Department of Corrections. And later, what a resort exec says Bahamians should do about crime as it threatens to impact the nation's top industry. Plus, we speak to an artist from Baintown who received an $800,000 Genius Grant. That's all coming up when Our News returns. Police are investigating a jailhouse altercation that has landed an inmate in hospital. Our News understands the inmate was badly beaten. Police say prison officers found the victim unconscious on Tuesday morning while making routine checks. Authorities say the inmate is in serious condition in hospital. Last November, 29-year-old Mikhail Miller was found dead in his cell. Charges were filed in that case. Miller's cellmate Diallo Williamson is awaiting trial for allegedly beating him to death. The recent change from a level 1 exercise normal precautions to a level 2 exercise increased caution designation by the United States government is not sitting too well with the Bahamas Hotel and Tourism Association. BHTA President Robert Sands says crime, if left unabated, is an absolute threat to the nation's tourism product. He says it's not just about the tourism sector, but the community as a whole. He says he believes collaboration is key.
There are many professionals who can lend their intelligence and support to the solutions that may be out there. But it's going to take a community effort because crime impacts everyone in society. And there are different points of views and different solutions that can be employed. And my call is that we must begin to work together to begin to address this vexing issue.
2 weeks after he said he would address the investigation involving Housing and Transport Minister JoBeth Colby Davis, Police Commissioner Clayton Fernandez says a team is reviewing the matter. Fernandez shot down claims that the matter is being drawn out because Colby Davis is a cabinet minister.
No, it's not drawn out. The investigation that came to our attention, we're doing the investigation. We're dotting our I's and crossing the T's, and then we'll be able to bring the results to the Bahamian people and straight up.
When our news comes back from the break, we turn our spotlight to stories making headlines across the world. Plus, we take a look at how women in the workplace can be unapologetically ambitious. And later, the story of a Bahamian artist who became a highly coveted grant recipient. The interview you don't want to miss when Our News returns. This is Our News. Welcome back. We turn our attention to world news as closing arguments are underway in the trial of the man accused of one of the deadliest shootings in U.S. history to reach a jury trial. 24-year-old Nicholas Cruz is facing the death penalty in the famous Parkland, Florida shootings in 2018. Prosecutors called it a planned systematic massacre in the sentencing phase of the trial on Tuesday. Nicholas pleaded guilty to the 17 counts of murder last October. A jury must decide whether to execute him or let him spend the rest of his life in jail without parole. In his guilty plea, he said he was very sorry and asked to be given a chance to help others. At the time of the massacre, he was only 19 years old, his defense attorney asking that his life be spared, citing mental health disorders from his mother's drug abuse during pregnancy.
What he wanted to do, what his plan was, and what he did was to murder children at school and their caretakers. That's what he wanted to do. That's what he planned to do. That's what he wanted to do. And that's what he did. And he picked Valentine's Day to do it while school was in session. And you could tell by the evidence and the testimony you've been sitting here and listening to everything, this plan was goal-directed, it was calculated, it was purposeful, and it was a systematic massacre.
477 pilot whales died after stranding themselves on 2 remote beaches in New Zealand. None could be refloated and died naturally or were euthanized. Witnesses calling it a heartbreaking loss, the first beaching happening on the Chatham Islands east of New Zealand mainland. Just Friday, the Department of Conservation reported 232 whales stranded on another beach at Ware Bay. 2 weeks earlier, 200 pilot whales died on a remote beach in Tasmania, Australia. An Essex man will do 12 years jail time for scamming more than 8,000 people into investing in a luxurious Caribbean holiday resort. The scam amounted to over £200 million. 70-year-old David Holmes used celebrity endorsements to lure people into the Ponzi scheme called the Harlequin Group. The hotel and resort developments used celebrities and politicians, including prime ministers from St. Lucia and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. More than 8,000 units, villas, and hotel rooms were sold in 7 locations in the Caribbean and Brazil. Only 176 were ever built. Arms was sentenced by the Southwark Crown Court in the UK. Florida residents aren't the only ones still facing tough times following Hurricane Ian. Protesters taking to the streets of Havana after being without power since September 27. Only parts of Cuba's capital have restored electricity. It's driven Cubans to the streets, protesting the lack of response by government. Even outside the capital, much of the island remains without power as work crews attempt to repair hurricane-damaged poles.
This has been terrible. No light, no food. We lost everything in our freezer. What we are worried about is the chicken because many bought some and it has gone bad. So we are waiting for the cycle to start over because many have children and some of the food has gone bad. They will need to start over. I hope government has that under control. Our fridge is empty. Unfortunately, there are a group of people who in a
Two Guyanese men bound for New York were arrested and charged for attempting to smuggle cocaine in bowls of curry. Local customs narcotics officers at the Chetty Jagan Airport found the cocaine while searching the suitcase of one of the accused as he attempted to board the JFK-bound JetBlue flight. The substance, later confirmed as cocaine, was found in 2 bowls of curry and valued at $31,000. That's about $6.3 million in Guyanese dollars. The second suspect was arrested from on board the U.S.-bound plane. And back here at home, Cable Bahamas Limited and its group of companies focusing on women in the community this morning, launching the first event in a women's empowerment series titled Unapologetically Ambitious. In the first of 2 sessions, young women from high schools throughout the country hearing from influential women breaking barriers. Megan Shepard reports.
Take risks, break barriers, and create success on your own terms. That was the message of Cable Bahamas' Unapologetically Ambitious seminar, led by Shelley Archambault, author and one of High-Tech's first female African-American executives. CEO of the CBL group of companies, Franklin Butler, sharing his hopes for attendees.
My hope is as they see Shelley, as they get to listen to Lisa, and the incredible women who are going to be around her, even our own leadership team, that they recognize that, listen, the world is theirs to be achieved.
I'd love all of these young ladies to walk away understanding, first of all, their value, and secondly, understanding that the world truly is their oyster.
The young ladies represented local high schools as well as from schools on Grand Bahama, Eleuthera, and Andros. They're expressing their hopes for the conference.
I love to see different walks of life as well, not just whether someone who's at the top or not just watching interviews from like Oprah per se.
And I'm looking forward to learning new things, career goals, how to be a better person, what to look for in the future.
The Ambitious group also sharing their aspirations post-high school.
In the future, I would hope to be an orthodontist or anesthesiologist.
Mass communications, majoring in that and then minoring in business, marketing. Pursue a dream inside law.
Definitely I'm going to college to pursue my career in forensics.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Megan
Still to come on Our News, today in history, find out interesting facts about the day that was October 12th. And the $800,000 Genius Grant goes to a Bahamian artist from Baintown. He speaks with Our News tonight. And then at 7:30, a rise in minimum wage. But is it enough? You weigh in when Our News returns. Welcome back to Our News. Now to another story we've been following over the past few days. We'd like to convey our apologies to Mr. Andrew Darville, whose retirement was lumped in as a recent redundancy of 2 other directors at Bahamas Power and Light in the broadcast we aired on October 7th. Security Director Lester Fernando and IT Director Sebastian Carey were both made redundant recently. Darville also retired recently. When questioned, BPL Chairman Pedro Roll had this to say about the 3 recent changes in management, including the 2 redundancies and 1 retirement.
In terms of certain positions have been made redundant, right? The Director of Security, that's a redundant position. So as we attempt to make BPL more nimble, more efficient, so that your bill doesn't go up. We make these decisions from time to time. So in the cases that you're talking about, in these 3 cases, they were all in an attempt to make us more efficient, right? To ensure that we can service the public in a better way.
Well, the menace era is over. Those profound words from the mouth of Free National Movement Chairman Dr. Dwayne Sands, and is the subject of this week's editorial, As I See It. It's available now at ournews.bs. Our News columnist Tanya Cartwright delves into the issue of party politics as she talks about apparent undercurrent rumblings in the F&M, indicating former leader Dr. Hubert Minnis is set to attempt a leadership comeback at the next F&M convention. If you want to read more, head over to ournews.bs/articles/opinion. And tune in every week for more As I See It with columnist Tanya Cartwright. Interesting facts to note about this day in history. On October 12th, at one time celebrated around the world as Columbus Day, the history books recognize it as the day the New World was discovered in 1492. The place of his landfall, most likely our very own San Salvador. Columbus and crew are believed to have made landfall via the Pinta, one of the 3 ships sailing on the historic voyage. Now, Columbus led 4 expeditions to the New World, reaching various Caribbean islands, the Gulf of Mexico, and South and Central America. His entry into the New World brought with it centuries of brutal colonization, the transatlantic slave trade, and the deaths of millions of Native Americans from murder and disease. Well, since the 90s, dozens of U.S. cities and states have replaced Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day, the Bahamas joining that growing list of countries distancing itself from the Columbus Day celebrations and adopting National Heroes Day instead. Also on this day, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington was changed from the Executive Mansion to the White House by President Theodore Roosevelt. And in 2007, former U.S. Vice President Al Gore and the UN panel on climate change won the Nobel Peace Prize for helping to galvanize the world's action against global warming. And then in 2017, the United States left the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, known as UNESCO. Then UNESCO Director General Irina Bokova expressed her deep regret over the decision. And our own interesting facts to note in history today. Few honors carry the prestige of a MacArthur's Foundation Fellowship. The coveted award goes to artists, activists, scholars, scientists, and others showing exceptional creativity. In order to even be considered, you must first be suggested. Hundreds of anonymous nominators from across the United States are narrowed by a committee of about a dozen. This year, 25 recipients made the cut for the $800,000 Genius Grant, and among them is the Bahamas' very own Tavares Strawn. This Baintown boy is now counted among the world's greatest. In speaking with Our News from Paris today, he's crediting his Bahamian roots for his journey to this great achievement.
When I first got the call that I had won the award, my mind actually went straight back to me and my family and my brothers walking the roads of Baintown, where I grew up.
His connection to these islands is what makes Tavares Strawn humbly proud to be considered a creative genius by virtue of his MacArthur's Fellowship Grant, the first and only Bahamian chosen among 25 in the class of 2022. This Baintown boy reaching far and wide to be counted in the class, which includes an aerodynamicist trying to manage space traffic and ensure that satellites don't crash into orbit. As an interdisciplinary conceptual artist, Strawn has helped launch objects into space and also produce sculptures the size of a human hair. For as much as he's accomplished, it's his love of home and a family of creatives that he says has kept him grounded. His award, a testament to the extraordinary level of Bahamian talent.
I feel like we have so much to give as a culture. And I think that nurturing piece of it is so important, man. You can learn color theory and the principles of color in a jungle group. So between that and just being in a neighborhood and being around supportive family, I think is really an instrument that allowed and can allow any young person, regardless of your circumstances, to make it to the top.
A storyteller through his art, the MacArthur Fellow says he hopes his award encourages Bahamian artists to reach for the top by sharing their stories.
So I think it's important for people who are doing good things in the community to speak up about the potential that the community has. Because if you don't hear about the kid who was living in Baintown who actually went off to do X, Y, and Z, then how are the kids gonna know that there's a pathway out of their situation?
All right, now our 20-minute conversation also delving into Strawn's love for Junkanoo, Bahamian artists who've inspired him, including Stan Burnside. We talked about his plans to give back and how we can better promote the arts to inspire the next generation. Stay tuned to Our News This Week for more from MacArthur Fellow Tavares Strawn, and we certainly would like to wish him well on his journey. Well, the new exhibit, The Lucayans, the Valour of the Vanquished, opened this morning at Pompey Museum on Bay Street. It places a spotlight on remembering our nation's indigenous population and culture. Our Marlena Leonard was there.
The poignant opening ceremony for the new exhibit, The Lucayans, the Valor of the Vanquished, featured tributes like a symbolic conch horn blowing and a dedication written and presented by Patricia Glinton McColas. There was also remarks from Prime Minister Philip Davis, who focused on remembering those that came before us.
These artifacts on display in Pompey Museum speak to a civilization that coexisted with nature and created amazing masterpieces in clay, stone, and wood. These were a proud people who discovered the Bahamas long before Europeans did. The Lucayans deserve to be celebrated and recognized for their accomplishments.
And the new exhibit includes near lifelike mannequins and an immersive sound room with a recreation of a Lucayan cave. It was 530 years ago today when the Lucayans and Christopher Columbus's expedition made contact for the first time, a meeting that would have dire consequences for the native islanders. But Columbus is one aspect that Namiko Miller, the curator of the exhibit, says they didn't want to focus on.
What we wanted to do is retell the story of the Lucayans without the European context, without talking about Columbus, because the Lucayans had a rich and highly classified society that existed before Columbus arrived. And so we wanted to actually tell that story. The artworks depict that, the archaeology of the island.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Marlena Leonard.
All right, thanks, Marlena. To watch that story again and for all of today's top stories, visit ournews.bs. That does it for us in Our News at 7. Joining us now is our Atalia Hall with the latest headlines. Atalia?
Yes, Candino, an interesting story with the Genius Grant winner. Wow, $800,000. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. And he was really just quite vulnerable today, telling his story and talking about his family that still is living in the Bahamas and how his work is still inspired, very much so.
Very interesting.
Junkanoo and so many other artists that he talked about. But we have more on that coming up later on in Our News.
Okay, and minimum wage still dominating the news. We've got reaction tonight to that minimum wage increase announced by the Prime Minister last night.